Hello everyone, what's up? Today in this video we're gonna talk about state management procedure in Flutter. Now, why do we need to follow um, state management procedure or pattern? Well, you can write your code yourself without following any procedure or pattern. But think about a situation in future. If you want to update your app or if you want to add a new feature in your app, then you will fall in a problem. You may not understand the code, your code may not be scalable or readable. So to overcome such problems, we should follow a pattern or procedure. So from available procedures, we're gonna talk about the BLoC pattern, which is business logic component. Now, to understand this, now it's a really critical topic, especially if you are new in Flutter or in programming. But don't worry, you should go through some articles. I will provide this link in the description. You should go through this article. There are some terms you should know, like streams, sync, and many more. Especially especially like the reactive programming terms. Okay, but don't worry. To make our life easy, there are some packages available, and one of them is this one, Flutter BLoC, and the author is this guy Felix Angelo. We're gonna use this package instead. Okay, so let's add the package in the pubspec YAML. I already have added it. I already have added this package. Now let's talk about three terms to understand the BLoC. The one is stream, another one is event, and finally state. We should know these terms at least. Okay, so stream is just like a flow of data, okay, and event is just like the actions occur in the screen, like button click, scrolling, navigating between screens, and just like the actions on the screen. Okay, and the state is the outcome of the event. Simply, event goes in and state goes out. Event are the input actions or any other actions on the screen. I'm explaining, I'm trying to keep the things as simple as possible. You may go through in deep explanation, okay, by following several articles available on the internet, but I'm trying to keep the things as simple as possible. So stream is just like a flow of data. Event is just like actions on the screen, like button clicks and many other actions like navigation and so on. And states are the outcome of events. Okay, now I am following a simple example. We should not jump into a complex one at the start. So we'll move forward to the complex example gradually. Okay, let's start with the simple one, the built-in project provided with Flutter, which is the counter app. This one, the counter app. Okay, we'll apply the BLoC procedure on this app. Now there is only one floating action button for incrementing the variable, counter variable, but later on I will add another one for decrementing, a minus button. Okay, now let's talk about the terms I just talked: event, state, and stream. So what are the events and state in this app, in this counter app? Now I said that event are the actions on the screen. So what are the actions on this particular app? The actions are clicking on the buttons, this button and the other button I am going to add, which is the negative button. So these are the actions, I mean the events of this app. So clicking on the buttons are the events. The click events are one for incrementing the count and the other one is for decrementing. So there are two events, one for incrementing and the other for decrementing. So let's create the event file first. Counter event dart. Okay, this is the event here. Let's create an enum counter event. Enum counter event. There is a typing mistake. Increment decrement. Okay, you're using enum, but you can use class as well, just like this. Event and another class increment event, which gonna extend the event class, and similarly another one for decrementing the event, for the decrement event. Okay, just like this we can use classes, but let's use the enum. Okay, counter event. So this is the event of our app, but what about the state? See, when we click on the buttons, I mean when the event goes in, what is the output? What is the output? Output is just a simple integer, just an integer, nothing else in the whole app, right? So just an integer is our state for this feature, for this counter feature. Whether we click on the plus button or the minus button, the output is the integer. So state of this app is just an integer. So for that why we don't need to create another separate file for that event. We can use the integer variable directly, okay. Now let's create the counter BLoC file. Let's create the counter BLoC dart. Okay, counter BLoC. Let's create the class counter BLoC, which gonna extend BLoC. Let's first import the BLoC package. Import BLoC.dart. Okay, here as type parameter we have to mention two things: the event and state of our app. Event and state. So our event here in this feature is counter event, and the state is a simple integer. Done. Now let's implement the two unimplemented methods. One is a getter method, initial state, and the other is map event to state. I'm going to explain. So what is this initial state? The initial state of our app is 0. Okay, when you start the app, the variable will be 0. So the initial state is 0 here, direct 0. Done. Now what about this function, map event to state? It just convert the appropriate event to state. Okay, the related event for related state for the event, respective event. So let's use a switch case here. Switch is event. And what are the cases? Two cases here. Two cases here. One is for incrementing event and the other is for decrementing the event. So first event, which is counter event dot increment, sorry, for this counter event dot increment, we're gonna increment the current state. Now let's talk about the stream that we stream. So we said that stream is the flow of data, just flow of data, and here the flow of data is integer. For clicking on the buttons, just a minute. So for clicking on the buttons, so for stream we have to use a special keyword here, which is async star. So now counter event, then we have to use this yield keyword. So what is this yield? Now remember, when we write a function, we have to return appropriate return type of that function. If the return type is integer, we generally return an int. If the type is string, we return string, right? But when we use async, async for stream, then we don't need to use return. Instead, we need to use the the yield keyword instead. Okay, so as we are using sync here, we need to use yield keyword here. Okay, so let's move forward. What we're gonna yield, we're gonna yield the current state and increment it by 1. Current state plus 1, and other event is counter event dot decrement and yield current state minus 1. So we are done with this counter BLoC class. There is nothing more to do. Okay, now let's move to the main.dart file. So now let's talk about the UI. We have only a single floating action button, but we want another one. So for that, let's use a column here. Column. A column, and main axis alignment and cross axis alignment dot end. Children floating action button, child is an icon, on pressed property is empty for now. We will add it later. Let's copy this one and paste it. Change the icon. Okay, this is the output. There should be a padding between, so let's add a padding widget. Padding agent sets dot symmetric vertical 5.0. What's wrong? Oops. Vertically 5.0. Let's see. Okay, that is fine. Now let's edit something. We don't need this counter variable and this increment counter method, so let's delete those and we are good to go. Now, as the home of this material app, we're gonna use the BLoC provider. We're gonna use the BLoC provider. I'll tell you the reason. And as the type parameter, let's mention the counter block that we just created. So this is the BLoC provider. Now the BLoC provider, here a counter block we have mentioned in the type parameter. Now the counter block will be available down the tree. Okay, we don't need to worry about the access of the counter block, as we are using the BLoC provider in the up the order, so the counter block will be available down the tree. Okay, also we don't need to think about the disposing of the block. The BLoC provider will automatically dispose the block. We don't need to do it in the dispose method, like this dispose method. We don't need to do this. The BLoC provider will automatically dispose the block by itself. Okay, now it has a builder and a child. So what will be the builder context, and let's return the counter block. Okay, and the child is this this home page, my home page. Okay, now my home page is stateful now, as we are using the BLoC packages, and for implementing the BLoC pattern we don't need this widget to be stateful, at least for this widget. So we don't need a stateful widget, rather we can make it a stateless widget. Stateless widget. Let's edit this, my home page. Okay, title, let's add a title here. String title, my home page. This is the title. Done. And let's mention the title here, Flutter BLoC. Okay, so we have added the BLoC provider so that we can access the counter block down the tree. Now as the body here, we are using a center widget, and inside that we are just showing a text. Now wrap this center widget with the BLoC builder widget. BLoC builder. Okay, now as a type parameter we have to mention two things here. As the type parameter we have to mention the counter block that we just created. Counter block, one is the counter block, and the other one is the state of the block. Now the state in this case is just an integer, so int is enough. So done. Now it has a builder function, builder, and this builder will take the context, and the other one is the current state of the block. Current state, so let's name it as data, current data, or data enough, data. Okay, now let's return this center widget. I know it's a bit complicated. Return the center digit. Okay. Okay, done. We are done here. Now, what about the button click? Let's fix the issue. What about the button click? We also need a counter BLoC object here. So let's create it. Final counter BLoC. Counter BLoC is equal BLoC provider dot off. Let's in the type parameter, let's mention the counter BLoC. Okay, done. Now let's handle the button click events. As of now, there is nothing inside the onPressed method, but we want to pass the event to the BLoC. How? We have this counter BLoC variable, so we can do that by using this counter BLoC dot dispatch. We want to dispatch an event. So as we are clicking on this add button, the dispatched event will be the this one, counter event, increment event. Okay, so let's add that counter event dot increment. This is the dispatch event for clicking the plus button, and for clicking the minus button, the dispatch event counter event dot decrement. Okay, now we have dispatched the event. Now to fetch the data, the current state is this one, the data. We need to display the data. So just string interpolation data. I think that's all. Let's see. Build function return null. What's wrong? Let's make a fresh restart. So what is going on? Let's recap once again. We have the counter event in our simple app. There is two events, and one for incrementing the counter variable and the other one for decrementing. So for that we have created an enum counter event, increment and decrement. So as the state of our app is just a simple integer, we don't need to create a separate state file. And then we need this counter BLoC class where we extend this BLoC, and as the type parameter we have mentioned the counter event and the state. Okay, and then in the initial state we have said that the initial state is 0. Initially the data will be 0, that's why I have written 0 here. And we are in the map event to state method. The events are converted to state. When the increment event is triggered, it's gonna increment the current state by +1, and when the decrement event is triggered, it's gonna decrement the current state by -1. So that's our counter BLoC class, and in the main.dart file we have added a new floating action button for decrementing the widgets, and in the material app we have used this BLoC provider so that we can get access of this counter BLoC down the tree. Also another advantage of using this is that we don't need to dispose the counter BLoC manually. BLoC provider will automatically do that. Now in the body we have used this BLoC builder, and as the type parameter we have to mention the counter BLoC and the state, type of the state. As the state is integer in this app, we just mentioned the int. And builder takes two parameter here, context and the data is the current state of the app. And then inside the builder we have to return the child. I forgot to use this keyword return. Okay, we have returned this center widget, and inside that we have the other widgets of our UI. Now, how to handle the button clicks? Inside the onPressed method, inside onPressed method, we have used this counter BLoC variable that we created. This counter BLoC variable, and then dispatch the event, the appropriate event. The counter event dot increment for adding the for add button, and counter event dot decrement for the remove button. And then how to display the data. As I said, this is the current state of the BLoC, so we can simply display the data just like this, string interpolation. Now let's see the app. This is the app. Initial state is 0, that's why it is 0. Now let's click on the buttons. 2, 3. Okay, increment button is working perfectly. Let's see the decrement button. Yeah, it is working perfectly as well. So that's all about the BLoC today, Flutter BLoC today. I'll try to come up with a more complex example, but as a starter, just I think that's enough to follow a simple project like this counter app. So no more today. I'll try to come back with more complex Flutter BLoC example. Okay, ta-ta.